Hello everybody, Disciple here with Gaming Curios. Now if you guys are into Blizzard games, then you might be just as excited as we are about the release of Destiny 2, and I'm even more excited to announce that we're going to be making Destiny 2 videos as well. To celebrate the launch of the beta and our new channel, we're doing a $300 Battle.net giveaway, where 5 lucky winners will be able to buy Destiny 2 or spend it on just about any other Blizzard title they may play. Check out the link below to enter, it's super easy to get into the giveaway, and we're going to be announcing the winners as soon as it's over on stream. Good luck and enjoy the video. Have you ever thought about ways that you would change some of the Overwatch maps? Whether it's a new flank route, an atmospheric or environmental change, or maybe an entirely new concept altogether for that particular place. Well, every map in the game goes through tons of iterations and changes before it ever makes it to the live servers, and Blizzard puts a lot of thought and care into each and every one, which means that they were actually pretty different at some stage in the past. So in this video, we're going to take a look at some of the original map concept art and talk about some of Overwatch's most famous maps before they were ever released and what they could have been like. Now the first concept art we're looking at is for what is probably Overwatch's most iconic map, Kingsroad. Interestingly enough, the concept art looks pretty similar to the Kingsroad that we play in the game today, but it definitely raises some big questions towards potential gameplay and how the map could have played out differently, and not for the better, if this image came to life. Now the first big difference here is that the wall that creates the choke point before the capture point isn't present in the art, and the bus is moved back quite a bit towards the capture point, probably because a wall like that has no practical function in the real world. Now when you think about it in terms of gameplay, however, this difference would have seriously changed the fight over the control point in some really bad ways. Kingsroad Point A has always been one of the hardest points in the game to defend because the attacking team's spawn point is so close to the control point that teams on defense struggle to make it back in time to keep it contested when phasing a wave of constant respawns, and there are so many ways to attack it, and you're really so exposed when you're out on the point that the attackers can really choose a lot of ways to try and poke at you or to try and attack from. If the bus in the game was placed here with no walls to provide a choke point, then the street would be far more open and create an even shorter route for dive compositions to head straight onto the point. With no good choke to set up on, defending the capture point would have been pretty hopeless, but thankfully, defenders do still have a chance because they can set up there with a Mei wall, or with a Reinhardt shield, or even with some sort of turret foundations. Now, probably the coolest part of the concept art is seeing how much of the original idea actually did make it into the game, however. The statue to Mondada appears in-game exactly how it does here, although mirrored and just pushed back instead of towards the center and creating a bit of a roundabout. Much of the skyline and buildings remain unchanged as well, including the ticker outside of the movie theater, which was oddly carried over despite the building to the left, PR, losing its name but keeping a very similar interior. This art perfectly brought to life the atmosphere of Kingsroad and clearly laid all the ground for the level design team to bring this scene to life in what is probably my favorite map in the game, since it's so darn fun and it's just been so iconic to play on for the entire history of Overwatch. Now the next concept art that we're going to look at takes us to Hanamura, specifically what looks to be the ground between the first and second capture points on the map. Now this art raises some interesting questions as well. First off, we see the stone monuments that have been replaced in-game by boulders. These stone formations definitely had the option to play into the lore behind the Shimada clan and Hanamura and Genji and Hanzo's individual lores, because we see the same decorative formations on the entrance to the shrine as well. So why would Blizzard choose to remove them in favor of some boulders that provide very little sort of cover or aesthetic value and really little practical use in the game at all? Now in terms of gameplay, this temple would have been an utter nightmare to attack. Both the left and right flanks look closed off in this concept, meaning that attackers would have to run right through the middle, which is split by this partition. Attackers would be funneled through a narrow corridor where heroes like Junkrat, Pharah, Torbjorn, and Mei could completely deny access to the final control point. Area denial would have been a huge strength for defenders here, and it's not hard to see why additional routes might have been added onto the sides to be able to break that bunker. Now with no sort of city skyline in the background and a more secluded and ceremonial feel with the stone walkway and sigils, this could be a really fun environment to see added in the future as an elimination or even capture the flag area. Exploring more of the historic Hanamura could be a gateway to more lore behind the Shimada clan and its beloved brothers Hanzo and Genji. And although Hanamura itself might be a weird town to revisit, somewhere else in Japan wouldn't be unthinkable since we have so many maps in other countries like the United States. Now the concept art number 3 gives us a look at the early concepts for Volskaya. At first glance, the map looks pretty much unchanged, but it provides a glimpse into the evolution of Overwatch lore over time. Now, most notably, there are no mechs patrolling the city like we see now. This kind of goes to show how Blizzard is constantly evolving the story and the world behind the game, because the map came later to build an entire story behind this factory and became a pretty pivotal point in the Overwatch history overall. Volskaya Industries is responsible for producing the machines that now stand so tall in the current map's background. Designed to defend Siberia from an onslaught of Omnics, the mechs aren't present in this concept art, and the only sense of fortification that we really see is a weaponized looking turret in the bottom of the image, which sits where the elegant house is today, just to the right of the attacker's exit. Could this have been a designer toying with the idea of mountable turrets in-game, or is it just for added flair to show that there was a lot of military presence here and this is a post-war zone? Now, the only other noticeable differences here are the wall on the backside, which seemingly prevents an attacking flank from over the frozen river, and what looks to be a more narrow choke point leading towards capture point A. That would certainly be a nightmare to break through. Even the environmental lighting and snow in this image is nearly identical to what we currently play though, which is a testament to the level designers and the environmental artists behind the scenes working together really well, being able to take these amazing concept art pieces into what are generally playable and mostly balanced maps, even if Volskaya itself has had a little bit of an icy history. Now, the next image of Watchpoint Gibraltar provides us another glimpse into how the evolution of Overwatch's lore and world has shaped the world that we play in, and possibly more so than in any other of the early concept arts. In terms of level design, this part remains fairly similar to the Gibraltar we play on today. However, there's one glaring difference. There's no ground level entrance to the upper defensive platforms unless this door just to the right of the words Lab 2 was intended to function as some sort of elevator or staircase, which means that if this form of the map had made it to live, attackers would have had a very hard time contesting the high ground at the first corner of the map, and the defending team might play forward a lot farther defending the original spawn point of the payload. Now, what's more interesting than that, however, is how the iteration of Gibraltar sells it as a scientific research facility and not a launch platform. As we know from both the Recall animated short and the map in-game, Watchpoint Gibraltar is essentially a hangar for Overwatch operations, and Winston is specifically using this base as a means of launching a satellite into space in order to recall the agents of Overwatch in a time of crisis. This concept art shows a world before the launch, maybe even when Gibraltar was still in development. We see Lab 1 and Lab 2 and a less advanced infrastructure. It could even be possible that Blizzard was working on the animated shorts and the story behind the game as early as 2014, since the level design is almost identical despite the environmental changes. Now, our next concept art gives us a glimpse at something that could be completely different for the Overwatch world, and that's Peter Lee's early concept art of Numbani. In this picture, we see the familiar Numbani, a wildly adorned and decorated metropolis that remains rooted and inspired by the wild place that developed it. The buildings are decorated brilliantly, but still very inspired by the animal kingdom outside. However, there seems to be much less of a commercial influence. The most striking part, however, is this small road on the bottom of the image. First of all, the road's still unpaved, but it's clearly a path well traveled. And then we also see a string of huts leading all the way up to the city. Now, is it possible that the utopia built in Numbani today is just a safe haven for the commercially driven wealthy who live there, and there's actually a huge separation between what looks to be this very advanced society and a still developing culture all the way outside of it? Maybe, in fact, this harmony between Omnic and human that seems to exist in Numbani is a bit of an illusion as well. Now, conspiracy theories aside, this image really makes you think about what it could be like to have an Overwatch map that was pretty earthy and wild. Imagine if instead of escorting the payload through Numbani's streets, players were tasked with escorting the payload up a makeshift road through a string of villages to deliver it to the gates of Numbani. Each village would provide a ton of options for defensive characters to hide in or fortify, but would trees provide enough cover for aerial support to break the bunker? I've always wondered what a forest map could be like in Overwatch, and this concept art proves a beautiful look into it, even if we may never see it come to life. I'd really love to see some more maps that explore cultural diversity and more varied architecture than just super advanced future society replacing the cities that we already know about today, and Eichenwald probably gives us the best taste of that, but even having a less developed society where you have some of the less rich or wealthy individuals, perhaps showing Doomfist's hometown or some part of his lore, could be really fun and and interesting to play in, kind of combining and contrasting the super advanced technology and weapons that we have today with parts of the world that seem to never change no matter how much time goes on. Now, the final concept art here is probably the craziest difference compared to what the map is today. Peter Lee's early Anubis concept art blends the Egyptian desert and the technological age together in an amazing way. We still see the same ideas of houses built out of carved stone with Egyptian-themed statues, symbols, and glyphs. However, in this art, we see a lively city complete with cars and what appear to be mechanized camels. Now, the houses are lit up in this picture, there's neon lights highlighting the architecture and the buildings, and there's a fresh breath of life to a map that, in its current state, feels much more forgotten and abandoned. The busy city environment is a pleasant and unexpected change of pace. In the background, we can still see the iconic pyramid from Point B, but the Sphinx that sits off to the side and out of bounds is now lit up in neon green and dominates the skyline and is a bigger focal point of the map altogether. With all the color and activity in this image, it really makes you wonder what it could be like to play in a bustling city in Egypt with a night theme, with all of the city lit up and the attention to Egyptian mythology and history. And besides being beautiful to play in, a busy cityscape with shady corners and flank routes could pay homage to some old first-person shooter classics with narrow streets, multiple story buildings, and really tight combat throughout the map. Maybe in the future we could see this concept expanded upon and brought to life as part of an assault map in the same region, but honestly I really like the fact that we did finally step away from a bit of the advanced future society and showing an old society that has crumbled but not necessarily been rebuilt like we get to see in Anubis. So that's what Overwatch's original and most iconic maps could have been like based on their original concept art. Now, is there any of this art you wish was in the game today? And if you could make any changes to a map in Overwatch, what would you like to change? Let me know down in the comment section below, because I always love hearing from you guys, and if you guys want to participate even more, you can join our Discord community as well, where we have tons of active members and we have a lot of fun. As always, make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing to Overwatch Curios for more content in the future. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.